The council chamber floated silently in the darkness between stars, a massive sphere of crystal and silver that housed representatives from 47 different worlds. Inside, the air shimmered with different atmospheres, each zone carefully separated by invisible force fields. Some areas glowed with methane clouds, others rippled with water, and some held nothing but vacuum. This was where civilizations came to prove they deserved a place among the peaceful species of the galaxy. Ambassador Helen Grant stood alone on the central platform, her boots magnetic against the metal floor. She wore a simple blue uniform with Earth's symbol on her shoulder. Behind her, through the transparent floor, she could see stars spinning slowly. Her hands were steady but her heart pounded. This was humanity's chance. Dr. Robert Mills stood nearby, holding a datapad with all of Earth's history compressed into files. He was nervous, constantly adjusting his glasses and checking the data. They had prepared for months for this moment. High Speaker Vellner floated at the head of the chamber. He looked like an enormous jellyfish made of glass, with lights pulsing through his transparent body in patterns of blue and purple. When he spoke, his voice came through a translator device that made it sound like wind chimes mixed with deep drums. Ambassador Grant of Earth, Vellner began, his lights flashing yellow, your species has built ships that can cross the stars. You have sent messages of peace. Your technology is adequate. These things we have confirmed. But technology alone does not grant membership to the Council. We must understand who you are. We must know your history, your nature, your past. Tell us about humanity. Tell us about Earth. Helen took a deep breath. They had debated for weeks about what to share and what to hide. But she had decided honesty was the only path forward. If humanity joined the Council based on lies, it would eventually fall apart. High Speaker, honored members of the Council, Helen began, her voice steady and clear. Humanity comes from a world of great beauty and great hardship. We evolved under a yellow sun on a planet covered in water and land. Our world had predators. Many predators. And humans were not always at the top. Some council members leaned forward with interest. Others remained still, waiting. We survived by being smart and working together, Helen continued. But we also survived by hunting. Our ancestors chased animals across plains for hours, sometimes days, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. We call it persistence hunting. We literally ran our food to death. A ripple went through the chamber. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. One species that looked like floating flowers moved backward in their atmospheric zone. Helen pressed on. As we grew smarter, we formed tribes, then villages, then cities. And we fought each other. Often. We fought over land, over resources, over ideas and beliefs. We had thousands of wars throughout our history. Vellner's lights shifted to orange, which Robert had learned meant concern or worry. Wars? Please explain this concept more clearly. Organized violence between groups, Helen said quietly. Sometimes between small groups, sometimes between entire nations. Our largest war, which we call World War II, killed more than 60 million humans. 60 million of our own species, dead in just 6 years. The chamber erupted in shocked sounds. Clicks, whistles, hums, and vibrations filled the air. Several delegates actually left their zones and exited the chamber completely. Robert checked his datapad and saw that 3 species had already transmitted formal objections. How is this possible? Vellner asked, his lights flashing rapid red patterns. How does a species survive such self-destruction? We learned, Helen answered. Slowly. Painfully. But we learned. After that terrible war, we created rules. Laws about how wars should be fought. We defined war crimes and crimes against humanity. We built international organizations to prevent conflicts. It did not stop all wars, but it reduced them. And weapons? Another council member asked. This one looked like a collection of floating rocks held together by some invisible force. What weapons did you develop? Helen hesitated, then decided to continue with honesty. We split the atom. We created bombs that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We called them nuclear weapons. At our peak, we had enough nuclear weapons to destroy all life on Earth several times over. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the ambient hums and background noises seemed to stop. We created the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, Helen explained. It meant that if one nation attacked another with nuclear weapons, both nations would be destroyed. Everyone would die. It was horrible, but it kept the peace through fear. Vellner's lights had turned completely dark except for small flickers of deep purple. You are predators. You hunted your prey to exhaustion. You killed millions of your own kind. You built weapons to destroy your entire world. And you maintain peace through terror. Yes, Helen said simply. That is our history. But it is also our past. We have changed. We have grown. We have not had a major war in over a century. We have united our world under one government dedicated to peace and exploration. We come to you as a species that knows the cost of violence and has chosen a different path. High Speaker Vellner consulted with the other council members. Lights flashed between them in rapid patterns, some kind of communication humans could not understand. After several long minutes, Vellner turned back to Helen. The council has made its decision, Vellner announced, his voice formal and cold. Humanity's application for membership is denied. You are classified as a Category 5 predator species. A quarantine zone is hereby established around all human-controlled space. No contact between humanity and council species is permitted. You are too dangerous. We cannot allow a species with your capacity for violence into our peaceful community. Helen felt the words like a physical blow. Robert actually stumbled backward, grabbing a railing for support. But we have changed, Helen protested. We want peace. You want peace now, Vellner replied. But your nature is violence. Your history proves this. The decision is final. Return to Earth, Ambassador Grant. Do not cross the quarantine line. The platform beneath Helen's feet began moving, carrying her toward the exit. She looked back at the council chamber, at the representatives of 47 peaceful species who had just rejected humanity for being exactly what they were. Robert joined her at the airlock. What do we tell Earth? He asked quietly. The truth, Helen replied. We tell them the truth. We are alone. 6 months had passed since the council rejected humanity. The quarantine line held firm, marked by automated buoys that warned human ships to turn back. Council patrol vessels watched the borders constantly, making sure no contact occurred. Earth had accepted the isolation quietly, though many felt the sting of rejection deeply. Admiral Richard Cole sat in his office aboard the Earth Defense Fleet flagship, the Victory. At 52 years old, his hair had gone completely gray, but his eyes remained sharp. He was reviewing supply reports when his communication officer burst through the door without knocking. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission. It is coming from across the quarantine line. From Council space. Richard stood immediately. That is impossible. They forbade all contact. I know, sir. But the message is authentic. It is on their official diplomatic channel. And sir, it is marked as urgent. Richard followed the officer to the bridge. The crew fell silent as he entered. On the main screen, a message waited, encrypted with council protocols. Richard authorized the decryption. The face of High Speaker Vellner appeared, but he looked different. His normally bright bioluminescent patterns were dim and flickering. His body seemed smaller, deflated somehow. This message is for any human authority who receives it, Vellner's translated voice said. We were wrong. We judged you harshly. And now we face extinction for our arrogance. A species called the Kresh has invaded Council space. They came from beyond our galaxy. We have never seen such violence, such weapons, such dedication to destruction. Our defenses have fallen. Our worlds are burning. We have no warriors. We have no weapons that can stop them. We are dying. Please, if humanity still exists, if you can hear this, we beg you. Help us. The message ended. The bridge remained silent for a long moment. Captain Thomas Ward, Richard's second in command, spoke first. Admiral, they rejected us. Called us too dangerous. Too violent. They put us in quarantine like we were some kind of disease. I know, Richard said quietly. They denied us friendship. They denied us trade. They left us completely alone. I know, Thomas. I know all of that. Thomas looked at his commander. So what do we do? Richard stared at the screen where Vellner's desperate face had been. He thought about his daughter, who was 7 years old. He thought about what he wanted to teach her about humanity. About who they were when it really mattered. We help them, Richard said firmly. Send orders to all fleet ships. I want every available vessel ready to jump in 6 hours. Contact Earth Command. Tell them we need every ship they can spare. And get me our best intelligence on this Kresh species. Sir, we have no intelligence on them. We have been cut off from Council space completely. Then we go in blind. We figure it out when we get there. Move people. 6 hours. The bridge exploded into activity. Officers ran to their stations. Communication channels opened to every human ship within range. Across the solar system, klaxons began sounding as the fleet prepared for war. Thomas approached Richard privately. Sir, are you sure about this? They turned their backs on us. Which is exactly why we need to help them, Richard replied. They were wrong about us. Let us prove it. 6 hours later, the human fleet gathered. 73 warships, ranging from massive carriers to quick destroyers. It was not Earth's entire fleet, but it was substantial. Every ship carried marines, weapons, and medical supplies. Richard stood on the bridge of the Victory as the fleet prepared to jump. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Patricia Moore, approached with a data pad. Admiral, final ship count is confirmed. We have 12 carriers, 23 cruisers, and 38 destroyers. Marine complement is 40,000 soldiers. We are ready. Destination coordinates? Richard asked. The last known position of High Speaker Vellner's flagship was near the Talus system. It is a Council Garden world. Population before the invasion was approximately 8 million. Then that is where we go. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump on my mark. Richard looked around his bridge. These men and women were about to jump into an unknown war against an unknown enemy to save people who had rejected them. He needed them to understand why. Attention all ships, this is Admiral Cole, he announced on the fleet-wide channel. I know what you are all thinking. The Council rejected us. They called us monsters. They put us in a cage and threw away the key. Some of you are angry about that. Some of you think we should leave them to their fate. But we are not going to do that. We are going because that is who we are. We do not abandon people who need help, even if they once abandoned us. We are humanity. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is not weakness. That is strength. That is what separates us from the true monsters. Today we show the galaxy what humans really are. All ships jump. The fleet vanished in a flash of blue light, leaving empty space where 73 warships had been moments before. In Council space, the Kresh continued their assault on Talus Prime. Their massive warships fired on cities without mercy. Millions were already dead. The remaining Council defense ships retreated, unable to stop the onslaught. Then, directly above the Kresh invasion fleet, space itself seemed to tear open. 73 human warships appeared in perfect attack formation. The Kresh had never seen anything like them. The ships were angular, aggressive in design, covered in weapons. Admiral Richard Cole's voice boomed across all channels, translated into every Council language. This is the Earth Defense Fleet. Kresh vessels, you are attacking our friends. Stand down immediately or be destroyed. The Kresh War Master looked at the human fleet on his screens. These newcomers were small, their ships primitive compared to Kresh technology. He laughed and ordered his fleet to open fire. The Battle of Talus Prime had begun, and the Kresh were about to learn what humans meant by war. The first Kresh weapons struck the human fleet with devastating power. Energy beams tore through space, hitting the destroyer Courage and punching clean through its shields. The ship shuddered but held together. On the bridge of the Victory, alarms blared. Shields at 40% from one hit, Patricia Moore reported, her voice tight with tension. Admiral, their weapons are significantly more powerful than ours. Admiral Richard Cole watched the tactical display. The Kresh had 27 warships, each one massive. The human fleet had numbers, but the Kresh had superior firepower. A traditional engagement would be a slaughter. All ships, break formation, Richard ordered. Execute pattern Delta 7. Get in close where their big guns cannot track us effectively. Marines, prepare for boarding operations. Boarding operations? Thomas Ward asked, shocked. Sir, we have never boarded an alien vessel before. We do not know their ship layouts, their atmosphere, anything. Then our Marines will figure it out. Execute the order. The human fleet scattered like startled birds, each ship moving independently at high speed. The Kresh weapons were powerful but slow to track. Human ships darted between the massive enemy vessels, firing at close range, targeting weapons and engines. On the Council observation ship safely behind the battle lines, Telmar watched with his primary visual sensors extended. He was an anthropologist, not a military observer, but the Council had placed him here to document humanity's response. What he saw confused him. They are flying directly at the enemy ships, he said to his assistant. That is suicide. Why would they do that? Lieutenant James Parker stood in the launch bay of the Victory with his Marine squad. 20 soldiers, all in powered armor, all carrying enough weapons to fight a small war. Their transport ship, a small armored craft, waited with its engines hot. Listen up, James called out. We are going to board that Kresh command ship. We breach the hull, we find critical systems, and we wreck them. Simple as that. We have no idea what is inside. Could be vacuum, could be acid, could be poison gas. That is why we have these suits. Stay together, watch each other's backs, and remember your training. Private Lucy Carter checked her weapon for the third time. She was 23 on her first real combat mission. Sir, what if we encounter Kresh soldiers? Then we deal with them. You have seen the briefing. They are silicon-based, about 8 feet tall, very strong. Aim for their central mass. Keep firing until they stop moving. Any other questions? No one spoke. Good. Load up. We launch in 60 seconds. The transport ship launched from the Victory's Bay, accelerating hard toward the Kresh command ship. Behind it, 15 other transports from different human vessels did the same thing. The Kresh tried to shoot them down, but the small ships were too fast, too unpredictable. James's transport slammed into the Kresh hull and fired its breaching charges. Metal screamed and tore. Atmosphere vented into space, visible as a white cloud of frozen gas. The Marines charged through the breach. Inside the Kresh ship, the atmosphere was methane-based and hot, over 200 degrees. The Marines' suits protected them, but visibility was poor. Red emergency lights flashed. And then the Kresh soldiers appeared. They were massive, crystalline beings that moved on 6 legs. Their bodies reflected light like dark glass. They carried weapons that fired superheated plasma. Contact, James shouted. Open fire. The corridor became hell. Plasma bolts and human bullets filled the air. The noise was deafening even through helmet protection. The Kresh were strong and their armor was tough, but human weapons were designed for one thing: killing efficiently. Lucy found herself face to face with a Kresh soldier. It towered over her, raising a bladed limb to strike. She emptied her entire magazine into its central mass. The creature shattered like glass and fell. Back in space, the battle raged. The human destroyer Defiance took a direct hit to its engine section. Fire erupted through 3 decks. But instead of retreating, the ship's captain did something the Kresh could not understand. He rammed his burning ship directly into a Kresh cruiser. Both ships exploded in a brilliant flash. But before the Defiance hit, emergency pods launched, carrying most of the crew to safety. The Kresh were confused. These humans sacrificed their ships but saved their people. It made no tactical sense. On Talos Prime's surface, the Kresh had been bombing cities for hours. Millions of Council citizens huddled in shelters, waiting to die. Then human dropships began landing. Not to fight but to evacuate. Dr. Emma Foster ran through rubble-filled streets with her medical team. Buildings burned around them. A Kresh bomber passed overhead, strafing the area. Emma dove behind a collapsed wall, waited for the attack to end, then kept running. She found a shelter where 40 Council citizens were trapped. The entrance was blocked by debris. Emma's team worked frantically to clear it while Kresh forces moved closer. "Doctor, we need to leave now," her assistant said. "They will be here in minutes." "Not without these people," Emma replied, lifting another piece of concrete. "Keep digging." They cleared the entrance with seconds to spare. The Council citizens emerged, terrified. They looked like large insects with multiple eyes. One of them, clearly a child, was injured badly. Emma knelt beside the child and began emergency treatment right there in the street, even as explosions sounded nearby. Her hands were steady. She had done this before in other wars on other worlds. Telmar watched all of this through drone feeds and sensor data. He watched human ships absorb damage that should have destroyed them, yet keep fighting. He watched Marines board enemy vessels in what should have been suicide missions, yet succeed. He watched a medic treat an alien child under fire, risking her life for someone of another species entirely. "What are they?" Telmar whispered. "They fight like demons. They sacrifice themselves without hesitation. But they also save us. They protect us. I do not understand." After 18 hours of continuous combat, the Kresh fleet began to retreat. They had lost 9 ships. The humans had lost 3. But more importantly, the Kresh had lost something they never lost before: their confidence. These humans were unpredictable, willing to die for tactical advantage, and they did not break no matter how much damage they took. Admiral Richard Cole watched the Kresh ships jump to hyperspace. His fleet was battered. Over 4,000 humans were dead. But Talos Prime was saved. 6 million Council citizens lived because humans had fought. "All ships, begin search and rescue operations," Richard ordered. "Find every survivor, ours and theirs. Get medical teams to the surface. Priority is civilian evacuation." On the observation ship, Telmar compiled his report. His appendages trembled as he wrote. "Humanity is terrifying in combat. But they are also capable of great compassion. They are monsters who save the innocent. I do not know if we should fear them or thank them. Perhaps both." 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Talos Prime. The war had spread across 12 star systems. The Kresh kept attacking, but now they faced organized resistance. Human tactical advisors were embedded with every Council defense fleet, teaching them how to fight back. Telmar found himself assigned to the human carrier ship Defiance, the same name as the destroyer that had sacrificed itself at Talos Prime. The Council wanted observers with human units to understand these strange allies better. Telmar had volunteered, despite his fear. The ship's corridors were narrow and dimly lit compared to Council vessels. Everything was functional, efficient, with no decoration or comfort. It reminded Telmar of a weapon which he supposed was accurate. This was a warship after all. He found Sergeant William Brooks in the Marine barracks, cleaning his rifle. William was 38 years old, with gray hair at his temples and a scar across his left cheek. His uniform had seen better days, patched in several places. "Sergeant Brooks, may I speak with you?" Telmar asked through his translator device. William looked up and nodded. "Sure. Call me Will. Have a seat if you can manage it." Telmar settled his insectoid body onto a bench designed for humans. It was uncomfortable, but he managed. "I have been observing human military operations. I am trying to understand something. At Talos Prime, I watched your people take terrible casualties. Over 4,000 dead. Yet you kept fighting. You did not retreat even when the logical choice was to withdraw. Why?" Will continued cleaning his rifle, his movements practiced and smooth. "You want to know why we do not quit when things get bad?" "Yes. In Council history we have never experienced warfare like this. When we face overwhelming force, we negotiate or surrender. Preservation of life is our highest priority. But humans seem to accept death as acceptable. We do not accept it," Will said quietly. "We hate it. Every single death tears at us. But sometimes the alternative is worse. I do not understand." Will set down his rifle and looked at Telmar directly. "My grandfather fought in a war on Earth. World War II we call it. 60 million humans died. 60 million. Entire cities were destroyed. Children starved. Families were murdered in camps designed specifically for killing. It was hell on Earth." Telmar's translator barely kept up with the emotion in Will's voice. "My grandfather survived. He came home and he told his children, my father, about what he saw. The horror. The evil. The waste. And my father told me. We remember. Every human child learns about our wars. We learn about the cost. We learn what happens when good people do nothing while evil spreads." "So you fight because of history?" Telmar asked. "We fight because we know what happens if we do not. When the Council called for help, we could have ignored it. You had rejected us after all. But we came anyway. You want to know why? Because we have been where you are now. Helpless. Facing destruction. And we learned that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing." Telmar absorbed this information. It was not about tactics or strategy. It was about philosophy, about learned experience passed through generations. Over the following days, Telmar observed training sessions. Captain Margaret Stone worked with a group of Council defense volunteers, trying to teach them basic combat principles. The volunteers were from a species that resembled floating crystals, beautiful and delicate. "Listen carefully," Margaret said patiently. "I am not teaching you to be killers. I am teaching you to survive. When the enemy comes, you do not need to defeat them. You need to delay them long enough for civilians to evacuate. You need to make them pay for every meter of ground. You need to be unpredictable." One of the crystal beings pulsed with confusion. "But we are not warriors. We are artists and philosophers." "I know," Margaret said gently. "And I am sorry you have to learn this. But the Kresh do not care about your art or your philosophy. They only understand strength. So we teach you enough strength to survive." Telmar watched as Margaret demonstrated how to use cover, how to create choke points, how to fall back in organized retreat rather than panicked flight. She was firm but kind, never losing patience even when the volunteers made obvious mistakes. Later, Telmar found Margaret in the ship's small observation deck, looking at the stars. "Captain Stone, may I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead. You have fought in several battles now. You have killed Kresh soldiers. Does it bother you?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Every single one bothers me. I remember their faces even though they do not have faces like ours. I remember each one I killed. And I will carry that for the rest of my life." "Then why do you continue?" "Because the alternative is letting them kill innocents. I have made my peace with being a killer if it means children get to live. That is the burden humans carry. We do the dark things so others do not have to." Telmar spent time in the ship's medical bay, observing Dr. Emma Foster. She worked 18-hour shifts treating wounded humans and council citizens alike. She had been on Talos Prime, had run through fire to save people. Dr. Foster, I watched recordings of your actions on Talos Prime. You risked your life repeatedly for people you had never met. People of a species that rejected humanity. Emma looked up from her work, exhaustion clear on her face. And? Why? Why risk yourself for strangers? Emma smiled tiredly. Because they needed help. It is that simple. When I see someone hurt, someone suffering, I do not see their species or their politics. I see someone who needs help. And I am able to help. So I do. But you could die. Yes. But if I run to safety while people die when I could have saved them, then what kind of person am I? What kind of species are we? Telmar began to understand. Humanity's capacity for violence came from necessity, from hard history. But their capacity for compassion came from the same source. They knew suffering intimately, so they worked to prevent it in others. He watched human soldiers share their food rations with hungry council refugees. He watched engineers work around the clock to repair council ships. He watched teachers explain defensive tactics with infinite patience to species that had never held a weapon. The Kresh continued attacking, but they were losing ground. They could not understand human psychology. These creatures fought with determination that seemed supernatural. They accepted casualties but refused defeat. They destroyed enemy ships without mercy but treated prisoners with care. It made no sense to the Kresh military doctrine. Telmar compiled his observations into a comprehensive report. He titled it Understanding Humanity, the Dual Nature of Earth's People. In his conclusion he wrote, Humanity is not inherently violent or inherently peaceful. They are survivors who learn through terrible experience. Their capacity for war comes from necessity. Their capacity for mercy comes from wisdom. They are dangerous because they understand danger. They are protectors because they understand what needs protecting. The Council feared their history of violence. But their history of violence is precisely what makes them capable of defending peace. We judged them as monsters. We were wrong. They are guardians born from darkness, and perhaps that is exactly what the galaxy needs. He transmitted the report to the High Council, then returned to observe more human operations. There was still much to learn about these fascinating, terrifying, compassionate people from Earth. 3 months of brutal warfare had passed. The Kresh had been pushed back system by system. Their confidence had shattered against human determination and council species learning to defend themselves. Now the human fleet, reinforced by newly trained council defense forces, approached the Kresh home system. Admiral Richard Cole stood on the bridge of the Victory, looking at the planet on his main screen. It was beautiful in a strange way, glowing with orange light, covered in geometric crystal structures that stretched into space. This was the Kresh homeworld where their entire civilization began. The human fleet had the power to destroy it completely. Orbital bombardment could crack the planet's crust. Nuclear weapons could sterilize the surface. Chemical weapons could poison their atmosphere. Richard had all these options available to him. High Speaker Vellner floated beside Richard's command chair, his bioluminescent patterns dim with anxiety. The council leader had been aboard the Victory for 2 weeks, observing human command decisions. Now came the ultimate test. Admiral Cole, Vellner said quietly, what will you do? Richard did not answer immediately. He looked at his tactical display. The Kresh had pulled back their entire remaining fleet to defend their homeworld. 43 warships surrounded the planet, along with hundreds of defense platforms. They were prepared to fight to the last ship. Captain Ward, Richard said, open a channel to the Kresh homeworld. All frequencies. I want every Kresh ship and every Kresh citizen to hear this. Thomas Ward worked his console. Channel open, Admiral. You are broadcasting to the entire system. Richard took a deep breath. Behind him, his bridge crew fell silent. This moment would define humanity's place in the galaxy. This is Admiral Richard Cole of the Earth Defense Fleet, speaking on behalf of humanity and the Galactic Council. 3 months ago, the Kresh invaded Council space without warning or provocation. Your forces attacked peaceful civilizations. Your ships destroyed cities. Your soldiers killed millions of innocent beings. You brought war to people who knew only peace. On the Kresh command ship, War Master Threk stood rigid, his crystalline body reflecting the light from his ship's displays. He listened to the humans' words, translated into Kresh language patterns. Richard continued, his voice firm and clear. You believed you were invincible. You believed no one could stand against your might. You were wrong. The Council asked humanity for help and we came. We fought you. We bled. We died. And we pushed you back to your own world. Threk's military advisors clustered around him, their body patterns showing fear for the first time in their species' history. They had never lost a war. They had never retreated to their homeworld. This was unprecedented. Now I stand here with the power to do to you what you tried to do to the Council, Richard said. I could order my fleet to destroy your world. Every city, every ship, every life. I could turn your planet into a dead rock floating in space. And by the rules of war, by the laws you yourselves follow, I would be justified. You started this war. You showed no mercy. Why should I? Telmar, watching from the observation deck, felt his entire body tense. This was the moment. Would humanity prove to be the monsters the Council originally feared? Or something else? Richard let the silence stretch for several long seconds. Then he continued. But humanity does not wage war for revenge. We fight to protect. We kill to save. And when our enemy is defeated, we offer them something your species has never offered to anyone: mercy. Threk's body patterns flickered with confusion. Mercy was not a concept that existed in Kresh military doctrine. You have two choices, Richard announced. First choice, surrender. Stand down your fleet. Submit to justice through proper war crime tribunals. Your leaders will be held accountable for their actions. Your people will face restrictions and oversight. But your civilization will survive. Your children will live. You will have a future. Richard paused, then delivered the second option. Second choice, fight. Defend your world with everything you have. And we will destroy you. Not because we want to, but because you will leave us no alternative. Every ship, every defense platform, every weapon you have will be eliminated. And when your military is gone, when you cannot fight anymore, we will still offer you surrender. Because that is who humans are. We do not exterminate. We do not commit genocide. Even against an enemy who showed no such restraint. Threk looked at his advisors. In their culture, strength was everything. The strong conquered, the weak perished. But these humans had demonstrated superior strength and were offering mercy. It violated every principle Kresh civilization was built upon. You have 1 hour to decide, Richard finished. Choose wisely. Admiral Cole out. The channel closed. The bridge remained silent. Velner floated closer to Richard. You would truly spare them? Velner asked. After everything they have done? Yes, Richard said simply. Because if we become like them, if we slaughter them the way they slaughtered Council citizens, then what are we fighting for? We become the monsters you originally thought we were. But your people died. 4,000 humans lost their lives fighting the Kresh. Richard's jaw tightened. And I will remember every single one. But they died protecting innocence, not to enable revenge. They died so others could live. If I massacre the Kresh now, I dishonor their sacrifice. 57 minutes passed. The human fleet maintained position, weapons ready but not firing. The Kresh fleet held formation around their planet, neither attacking nor retreating. Then, at 58 minutes, a transmission came from the Kresh command ship. War Master Threk appeared on screen, his crystalline body showing patterns that Telmar's database identified as submission and respect. Admiral Cole, Threk said through the translator, the Kresh acknowledged defeat. We surrender. In our entire history we have never surrendered. But you have demonstrated superior force and superior wisdom. We submit to your terms. We will stand trial. We accept your judgment. Richard nodded slowly. Thank you, War Master. Stand down your weapons. Prepare to receive inspection teams. And know this, you will be treated fairly. You will receive justice, not vengeance. That is the human way. The war was over. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council reconvened in their rebuilt chamber. Representatives from all 47 species gathered, along with representatives from 3 species the humans had liberated from Kresh occupation during the war. High Speaker Velner stood at the center, his patterns bright and clear. This council made a grave error 6 months ago. We judged humanity by their capacity for violence without seeing their capacity for wisdom. We called them too dangerous for membership. We were fools. Velner turned to where Ambassador Helen Grant stood with Admiral Cole and Dr. Robert Mills. Humanity saved us when we had no right to ask for salvation. They fought for us when we had rejected them. They showed mercy to an enemy that showed none. The Council formally apologizes to humanity. We offer full membership, including a permanent seat on the High Council with veto power over military actions. We offer this because we finally understand, humanity's knowledge of war makes them the perfect guardians of peace. Helen stepped forward, her voice carrying across the chamber. We accept membership with gratitude. But we have one condition. We propose the creation of a galactic defense force. Every species will learn basic defense. Not to conquer but to protect. Never again will peaceful people face invasion unprepared. Humanity will lead the training, but the force will belong to all species equally. The council voted. Unanimous approval. As the ceremony concluded, Richard shook hands with Vellner, the first physical contact between a human and a council leader. Vellner's body tingled at the touch, strange but not unpleasant. Telmar watched from the observation gallery, finishing his final report. He wrote, "Humanity is not the monster we feared. They are the monsters that protect us from real monsters. They carry the burden of violence so others do not have to. They understand darkness because they have lived through it, and that understanding makes them the perfect guardians of the light. The galaxy is safer because humanity exists. May we never forget what we almost lost by judging them too quickly." The new era had begun. Humans and council species working together, building defenses, sharing knowledge. The Kresh faced justice but not extinction. Peace returned to the galaxy, protected now by those who understood the true cost of war. And in the darkness between stars, other threats watched and decided perhaps this galaxy was not worth invading after all. Not when it had humanity standing guard.